we work very closely with accountants throughout the lifetime of a client to really try and add value. Um, when an accountant is looking after a client's circumstances, you've got to bear in mind that most accountants' focus is on doing the accounts every year, making sure that the compliance work is done every year, done correctly every year, helping clients with their business accounts, helping clients with their personal self-assessment accounts, and making sure that essentially clients stay on top of that record keeping and making sure that they stay on top of that filing. And they will offer advice in terms of making sure that tax efficiencies are built in where they can be. We perhaps look at things from a longer term because we're looking at succession. We're looking at what happens in 10, 20, 30 years' time, whereas accountant may be more focused on what happens today. When you bring those two things together, what we can do is offer more of an advisory service to a client. So if you bring your accounts to the accountant before the filing deadline, more often than not, you're filing a set of accounts maybe 9 months after the year end, whether that's the tax year end for your personal self-assessment or the year end for your business trading. So you're working 9 months behind in terms of information. When you want to look at something advisory, you need to look forward. You need to be proactive. So, for instance, if I want to look at options to reduce my tax next year by putting appropriate structures in place so I have less tax to pay, I need to put the structures in place today and then we'll get the benefit over the next 12 months. If I let the 12 months pass and then look back over 12 months for any tax efficiencies I can build in, I'm not able to put any of those structures in place. So the advisory function is looking forward. So we work very closely with accountants who are able to offer that advisory function, looking at tax advice, but also looking at sort of business advice and how those two things can tie together to make sure that clients are setting themselves up to be tax efficient over the next 12 months and beyond. Now, that's perhaps income tax advice. That's perhaps capital gains tax advice. That may be corporation tax advice, which are all areas that an accountant can advise on. Where we look at things is we look at inheritance tax, which is really long term. But how you build your estate tax efficiently and how you build your estate in terms of being effective when you invest in property and having that perform well, being effective as you build your business and having that perform well, and making all of that tax efficient really can have a significant impact on the estate that you build and then ultimately the legacy that you leave behind. So as soon as you're in that position, you need to get some advice from us to make sure that you're building that legacy in the right way. Thinking about the structures you need to have, whether that's in your business, whether that's for your property portfolio, whether that's for other assets in your personal estate. So we'll work very closely with accountants to help you to maximize what you're doing today, year on year on year on year, with that long-term view that ultimately you're building a substantial legacy that you're then going to leave behind for the next generation. And we'll put structure in place to make sure the next generation can inherit that, can manage it well, have the right legal structure, tax structure, but also from a personal point of view, the right financial education, the right business education, the right property education, to make sure that they are able to take on those assets, manage those assets well, and then be a steward of that legacy because it can then benefit their children and their children and their children. And all of that comes under the auspices of estate planning, of succession planning. It's about how you build that legacy and putting structure in place to make sure that that legacy is built upon from generation to generation rather than lost.